So our afternoon schedule is going to resume with a depot readiness panel chaired by our own ALC Executive Director, Renee Mosier. And Renee, if you will please take you and your panel up on stage and introduce them.
Okay, the mic's not turning on. Is it on? Can you hear us? Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody had a good lunch. So we'll try to not put anybody to sleep. It's always hard to be the first briefer right after lunch. So what we do want to do is have a bit of a panel discussion now on CCAD Readiness. And so can we get, I guess we're doing our own. Can we get the slides up? There we go.
Make it go back.
Can we go back one? One more?
I got the first one.
Oh, is that the first one? Okay. So,
Yes.
oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to the other panel members, but I do want to just kind of open with, so we've had a lot of discussion this morning about supply chain, end-to-end partnerships with the criticality of the partnerships with our OEMs, the DLA, our PEO, PM partners, but, you know, the relationship that we have with CCAD is critical in its contribution that CCAD does provide to Army readiness. And I want to reiterate, and I don't want to kind of replow old ground, but I do want to reiterate the criticality of the mission of CCAD, of not only on the reset line, but the part they play in secondary item repairs for the components as well. So with that said, each of the panel members are going to bring to a different perspective, and what I'd like to do now is just turn it over to Mr. Bob Sharp.
Thanks, Renee. I am Bob Sharp, Chief Operations Officer out at the depot. I think most folks in here are familiar with what the depot does. I'm just going to take a very few minutes and kind of go over what our missions are and how our missions tie directly into Army readiness, and maybe give you a little bit of numbers and a little more depth into what each of those missions are. So these statements are right out of our mission statement, and basically there's 4 aspects to our mission. We, of course, repair components and aircraft, return them to the force. We send our depot field teams out, and we work on aircraft on the ground and bring them back to readiness. We have an accident investigation board that assists with every accident investigation that the Army does, plus they do a lot of other services for us. And fourthly, we bring our soldiers into the depot and provide them hands-on aviation skill development. So this is the first aspect, that we do return aircraft to the warfighter, and this is just to show that over the past 15 years, CCAD has returned over 1,000 combat aircraft to the warfighter. And then across the bottom, you see the Apache, the Black Hawk, and the Pave Hawk. That's how many aircraft we did in those categories this year. And to Renee's point, we also, components is a big part of the business. If you add all those numbers up, that's over 400,000 engine, transmission, blades, and other components that have been returned to the force over the last 15 years. The other aspect of our mission is our depot field teams. If they can't bring the aircraft to us, we'll go to the aircraft. And the depot field teams returned over 76 aircraft to mission ready status this year. 81 last year, and I certainly appreciate Colonel Ryan's comments on one of the particular aspects where he helped his team out. This particular mission of the depot has an almost instantaneous impact on readiness. It saves months of bringing the aircraft back into the depot and having us do the work here. Instead, the work is done in the field in weeks or even days. I mentioned the Accident Investigation Board. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but just know that every Army Accident Investigation Board is supported by depot's teams. And then one of the last things I want to mention is we bring soldiers in the depot for hands-on skills development. They benefit from working first alongside a skilled artisan, and secondly, by repetition. They will see, in their few weeks at the depot, they'll see a task many times over that they may see only once a year out in the field. And the readiness impact here, of course, is obvious. The field is getting a soldiers that's better trained than before, but they also have a train-the-trainer aspect. And that young man or young woman goes back to their unit and they spread that knowledge. So in short, that's the 4 big missions of the depot, how we support Army readiness. And I'll just open that up. Well, actually, I'll turn it over to Ms. Jackson at this point.
I don't know if you guys were able to get the slides to be able to pull them up, but as they're pulling them up, just Drew Jackson, DLA Aviation. I think most of you are familiar with DLA. We go to the first slide.
Push the green button.
DLA has a large footprint across the globe, from supply chains to distribution to disposition services. There's a multitude that DLA supports across the globe for Army warfighter. What we want to focus on today is how we support Corpus Christi Army Depot and the readiness to CCAD. So with that, we'll move forward. And as DLA Aviation, our headquarters is out of Richmond. We have forward presence that sits directly with AMCOM and a forward presence team that sits directly with Corpus Christi Army Depot. And we are part of everyday production meetings, part supportability. We're part of the implementation of the art of probable and fully support the CCAD mission and them getting that aircraft and the components back on the shelf to support warfighter readiness. And this is a look at our team here at CCAD, this at Forward Presence team, and how we're engaged daily. I won't make her stand up, but we do have Miss Melissa Lopez in the room. She's our lead here at CCAD for the team for our Forward Presence. She plays a huge role in that part supportability that continues to allow all those production lines to be supported from the aircrafts to the components, and they're heavily engaged. We continue to support several initiatives, such as the IPV contract that's been implemented to have the bench and shop stock material on the floor for the artisan. We participate in PMRs. It gives us a lot of intel to know where things are at, where things are going. And we continue to work with Marco Garcia and his team on the supply chain and improving Army supply plan. And that's how we get the forecast from CCAD to plan ahead and have the parts on the shelf for supply availability, or in DLA terms, we call it material availability. We've also partnered with CCAD to also look at low-use items and how we can support CCAD with those low-use items. Because as you saw in Mr. Sharp's presentation, there's a lot of component programs going on. There's a lot of aircraft moving through. And it's just those ankle biters that will come through here and there that are very low use. So we're also working initiatives there so that way they can continue to go through the gate in a timely manner. And ultimately, I thought there was a last question slide there, but with that, we'll open it up to questions, I think, at the end of the panel. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and...
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Schlesinger. I'm a contract engineer with Aviation Solutions. I support AED's maintenance engineering division. And just give me a second here to bring up my slide. Okay, here it is. What I'd like to do this afternoon is just take a couple minutes of your time to kind of highlight some of AED engineering support contributions to CCAD readiness. Who is the maintenance engineering division? We are AED's logistics experts, and we provide engineering support to all types of maintenance and spares activity. And of course, CCAD is our largest customer. We've got approximately 180 engineers and analysts broken down into platform-specific teams, which also includes unmanned systems, also maintenance and acquisition and projects branch, and we have liaison engineers deployed out to support the field units, and lastly, sustainment engineering. Who do we support? Overhaul recapitalization of airframe and components. We do this by codifying repair procedures and the depot maintenance work requirements. Also crash damage repair, working, coordinating with the OEM and also the program managers in Huntsville on that particular platform to develop those repair procedures. And then, of course, new repair development in the form of maintenance engineering call dispositions to CCAD. Getting onto specific platform support, so as most here know, CCAD is dealing primarily with just crash-damaged Apache airframes at this time. Here's a example of a Delta that a crash-damaged battle kit Echo tail boom was grafted on. A repair procedure had to be developed for that with coordination with the program manager, of course, for parts interchangeability and ensuring airworthiness requirements were met. And that's kind of the result, as you can see from the pictures, and the aircraft was returned to service. Here's an example of an Echo model that needed some extensive work. What the maintenance engineering division did was modify the DMWAR that supports the Echo model aircraft, and a pilot program was also created off of this repair to support future Echo model repairs at CCAD. Black Hawk aircraft support. Recapitalization's been occurring since 2003. Just this past fiscal year, converting to a theory of constraints approach. AED supports with engineering expertise, including 3260 Alpha to Lima recaps accomplished, and also the 60 line being converted over to a 60 Victor line. This will be the Army's first attempt at designing and performing this upgrade, and then work will also be completed in conjunction with this aircraft. And we also have a team of engineers working on the 60 Mike DMWAR as we speak, so that when that work comes to the depot, we'll be ready with the DMWAR. Cross-service support, 3 Pave Hawks completed by CCAD. We worked on Black Hawk to Pave Hawk cabin roof conversion kits, which helped by reducing RTAT. Also, we have engineers working component support for the Marine Corps Cobra and Navy and Air Force Huey. T700 engine, almost 400 inducted for overhaul. We worked with the OEM to kind of write a multi-tier maintenance plan in the DMWAR based on aircraft engine hours, whether it needs minor, major, or a full recap. Also of note, a repair procedure was implemented to take care of that intermittent oil leak in the B sump. Onto the Chinook. DMWAR for the aft landing gear swivel housing. Our cargo team developed a repair and overhaul for 50 housings to fill, a gap in a supply, and the result is a DMWAR that was verified and validated, and it's ready to go. Also with the Chinook is the Pusha pump repair, the DMWAR. It's still in work. We're working on the test equipment to bench test it, but the results should be improved reliability out in operations. And lastly, just our in-house SAFER program. 3 main goals: reducing costs for Army aircraft, increasing fleet readiness, improving safety. How is that done? We'll take parts that were deemed maybe initially not economically repairable by the OEM, and then we'll kind of store them and then look at alternate ways to repair the part. And the end result for this past fiscal year was 95% of the reparables that were identified were returned to service, so that obviously saved a lot of money, increased readiness by filling gaps in new part supply, and also a cost avoidance of nearly $9 million. And then just in summary, don't hold it against me, but I'm a career Navy person, so I just wanted to I didn't put this slide up here to take a dig at anyone, but I did want to say that when I was an operator and a field maintenance person, I kind of took for granted the importance of depot level maintenance. And every time I went out there, this is a Lone Wolf 4.5. It performed flawlessly on a 6-month deployment out doing a maritime interdiction operations, and it was rebuilt here at CCAD. So,
What's the guy with the axe?
yeah, I'm not sure what he's gonna do. But I did want to say thank you to CCAD, all the men and women working hard, doing everything, attention to detail, and it's the sum collaboration of all of those individual efforts that leads to an airworthy and safe aircraft to give to our warfighter. So thank you.
All right. I think usually a pause. There's like a little bit of a pause. Yeah. There we go. I'm Dean Hudson, and I'm the program manager for a program down here called Rimfire. And what we do on Rimfire is basically we do teardown analysis on incoming equipment coming into the depot. And the purpose of that is to identify what caused that component, whether it's an engine, transmission, gearbox, or whatever, what caused that component to come off wing, come back to the depot, and get overhauled. So we have a team of inspectors here at the depot that assess the condition of the equipment when it comes in. And we then store that data in a database, and it's accessible through a website. So you can go into this website and pull out information on any of those components to find out what the top drivers are. You can look at individual components to see what their failure modes are, things like that. We do have a pretty broad base, user base on the Rimfire database. As you can see on the left bottom side, we have probably between 750 to 800 active users that go in, and these are folks that work at RDEC, the various PMs, OEMs. We have a lot of different types of users that go in to look at this data to see how they can come up with better corrective actions or better designs in the future. This is a good chart to kind of show the mission of Rimfire and why it's there. It's been there about 15 years now, so we've got a pretty good history. But the line in the middle is a graphic depiction of a metric that we use. It's called time between depot visits. And what this metric does is it gives you a good idea of the useful life of a depot level repairable when it goes out in the field, gets used, and come back. So we measure that using Army 2410 data. We calculate that, and we look at it over time to see if it's trending up, staying the same, or going down. And what we also do with it is we compare it against goals, life goals. So if, say you have a gearbox that's lasting 800 hours in the field on average, but in the goal back at the PM shop is to get 1,500 hours, for instance. What we do is we collect the type of data necessary to find out why there's a gap. Why are we not making the 1,500 hours? So that's really the mission of Rimfire, is to gather that type of information. This kind of shows the process from an overall viewpoint on Rimfire. What we do at the depot is we do, like I said before, teardown analysis, condition assessment type work, where we do go in, we look at what type of failures are found in the equipment when it comes in. We scan all of the paperwork. We look at that to look for particular issues that might have sent that piece of equipment back. So we use all that different type of information, and we gather it in different databases in the Army. We use ours, of course, for the teardown analysis. That we also pull in 2410 data. We pull in logbook data, which is the maintenance logbook. That gives us a good indication of why a maintainer or a soldier may have sent that in. We look at PQDR data if there was any out there on that particular component. And then we do an investigative analysis on it. And this is done not only by my team, but it's also done by a lot of engineers from the RDEC, We have OEM participation in that, and we get together and basically have these scoring boards and conferences where we look at all this equipment and make a determination of what caused that engine or that component, transmission or what have you, to come back to the depot. We take that data then and we run statistics, and we can give you a pretty good idea of why a T700 engine comes back from the field, and we can put that in different percentages and tell you what the top drivers are. This is a quick schematic of the overall process, and basically what I want to show you on this one is that most of the inspection activity for rimfire is done down in the pre-shop analysis area at CCAD. And that's where our folks are. They really stand side by side with the CCAD maintainers and document all of this information that we get on the components. And we take a lot of photographs. We document it through write-ups by the inspector. We take photographs. We do measurements. All of that is then put into the database so engineers can assess it at a later date. This is just a quick slide of what we do, what kind of failures that we look for inside of the equipment. And those are some shots of our folks down on the depot floor. And if you haven't gone to the website, the Rimfire website, this give you a good idea of what they look like. Basically, inside that website, we have electronic teardown analysis reports. So you can go in there and pull up a whole bunch of information on each component that came into the depot. And we'll tell you really what every piece part inside an engine looked like when it came in. And we'll identify the ones that failed. We'll identify the ones that have unusual wear that may have caused some degradation in performance. So we identify all of that. And then if it's a scored record, we also tell you what the main cause of failure was and why it came back. This shows you the drill down capability of the data. This is, I think, an engine, T700 engine. The pie chart on the far right shows that low power and torque is a good slice of the returns that come back. But what Rimfire allows you to do is drill down from that, and then we can tell you why they came back for low power and torque, and go all the way down to the root cause of that particular engine coming back. And here's, I'll just have 3 quick slides here and some examples of projects that use the Rimfire data and have been successful in the past. And there's 3 different types. Overhaul process optimization. Rimfire data was used to go in and optimize the overhaul processes on the impeller inside the T700 engine. And that was done by the RDEC group down here, Kevin Reese's group. They wrote an MEO that allowed them to increase the limit on that part from 200 to 2,000 hours as long as it passed inspection. So that was had a big cost impact and savings. Another use of Rimfire data, this one was a success, Apache tail rotor gearbox. We identified the output shaft seal as the #1 driver of returns to the depot. And then there were 2 corrective actions that were put in place. One was a redesign and one was a field fix for this seal. You could actually replace the seal out in the field. And those 2 corrective actions have dropped the failures due to that problem dramatically, and you can see that on this chart. And then a 3rd example that I'll show you, and we have a whole lot of other examples. If you want to find out more about the program, you can get with me afterward. This one is improved maintenance practices. We find a lot of equipment is returned sometimes due to improper tools, or maybe there's a problem that is not being diagnosed properly out in the field. But here's an example of one where, given an additional tool, they were able to decrease the returns due to #3 bearing damage in the T55 engine, which was a big driver for a while. And we've shown a lot of trends now that show that has dramatically dropped over the years. All right, and I think that's the end of it. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Jeff Hess. I'm the product support manager for the soft PR and rotary division at Robbins. I'm one of the 2 token Air Force folks in here, so bear with me. I did want to give you an example of our organization as far as the aircraft we support. And we've got 10 separate MDSs, or Mission Design Series, 7 C-130s and 3 helicopters. CCAD is a big player in all 3 helicopters. You repair components across the board. You saw the aircraft line mentioned earlier that you produce some of our HH-60Gs, but you touch every one of our rotary aircraft. We are going through a transition, and I got a note in there, we support another program office. On our C-130 side, you see the number of different variant C-130s. We've got one platform that has 7 total aircraft, 3 are missionized. So that's it, 3 total in the DoD inventory. We are trying to get to where it's more modular and we can do a roll-on, roll-off capability to 7, but we're trying to get down to 4 separate aircraft instead of seeing that whole hodgepodge of 130s. A similar concept is also going on with the helicopters. Right now, my chart shows 97, but we lost an aircraft at Nellis, so we're down to 96. We're supposed to have 112. So right now, the operators are living without 16 aircraft. So we are very limiting the number of inductions that we have going into the depot. For some that remember the good old days where we had 8 to 10 to 12 aircraft at CCAD, you saw 3 and 4. We don't have the aircraft to give up. The operators demand them for the missions. We do have what's called an operational loss replacement program. The first unit gets delivered next June. There's 7 aircraft going to Gabreski. And then we've got 2 other bases. We'll get 6 each out of that, and then some going into test. So once we get those 21 aircraft, we will be up to our full complement. Then we'll start to smooth out and get the depot back to the number of inductions that we're looking at. But I did want to note here that you see the TH-1H, which is a UH-1H variant. That is going, there's no retirement date. So right now that's going out to 2040. That was built originally in the early 70s. The UH-1Ns are being replaced by an aircraft yet to be determined, but those are still going out to the mid-2030s. So the Huey components that CCAD right now is working on, we're going to need those for at least another 20 years, just to keep the readiness of the aircraft. Now, these aircraft, for the Hueys, for example, they do the nuclear support and the continuity of government up in D.C. So extremely important work for the nation. To give you an idea of where we're located, you see where all of our units with aircraft are located, either special operations, personal recovery, or the Air Force helicopters. What I wanted to note was the boxes in yellow we have a SPO personnel at. For CCAD, we have the largest investment of any of our depots. We've got personnel that are owned by the SPO here. We've got a rollable pool. We've got fixtures here. We don't have that anywhere else. If there's a crash damage, it's coming to CCAD. So we've got a long-term plan because, like I said, we're fully committed here. Now, I want to talk a little bit about personal recovery because a lot of that's been in the news. We do have it as Air Force core mission. We do fly our 60s with a refueling probe so that they can launch at a moment's notice. We did have this happen a few months back in Florida. We got a call from the unit on a non-fly day. So for operators, think about this. You get a rescue call. It's not a flying schedule day. So they put together 2 tanker crews, 2 helicopter crews, the rescue folks, and they found a translator to go rescue a sailor that was burned on a freighter 500 miles off the Florida coast. They flew out there, rescued him, flew back, got him to the hospital. Person was in the burn unit and survived, but that was only possible because of the dedication of the crew and the parts that they had to make those aircraft flyable, which y'all support. That wouldn't have been done without it. Now, the personal recovery is not a Air Force only mission, it's actually a DoD, it's in the DoD guidance. So all services have a piece of this mission. Best example I can give you is Hurricane Harvey. I don't know if y'all have heard, but there was a large contingent of different services assets that came down for rescue operations. Just for Harvey alone, DoD assets rescued over 2,000 people. To give you an idea, on the Air Force side, we had a guard unit from California sent 2 helicopters and 2 tankers for 5 days, and they rescued 113 people just in 5 days. And they're not able to do it without the components that you send, that you produce, because we had to have the kits there with the parts so they could keep them flying. Even though we're retiring the 60, we've got modifications because the customers still demand, this aircraft's not going out until late 20s. They still want capabilities, and the environment's changing. So we have 14 major modifications going on to the 60G right now. The reason that's important is a lot of these modifications will be done in conjunction with PDM, and they're done here at CCAD. So a lot of these capabilities, and I want to say it's like 4 or 5 on the block, get put on in conjunction with the PDM when the aircraft comes in. So not only are you maintaining the aircraft, you're adding capability to the aircraft. So my biggest 2 foot stompers is, A, we've got to keep our aircraft flying a lot longer, which I don't think is any news to anybody else. We're going to be doing components at least till 2035 and 2040. And from an Air Force standpoint, I'm really excited about your art of the probable and seeing the improvements, and really looking forward to seeing that take off on the component side. Because I've seen a lot on the Air Force, on the aircraft side. Now I'm looking forward to the component side. So I think that's it for me.
Okay, so before we open it up for questions, just a quick summary. So what we've laid out here is, Bob kind of started it out with laying out a lot of the other CCAD missions, but everything that we've talked about, the end game here is to increase aviation readiness. And all of the different players that are embedded with the team at CCAD to get after just that mission. So, are there any questions of the panel?
Got to be 1 or 2 in here somewhere. All right. Oh, look out, you guys, look out. Big dog is in the house now.
It's going to be for you.
Okay, this is for Drew. You wouldn't answer my last one, so this is you getting this first one.
You get another
Okay, so
chance.
as I do my travels around, the best practices I've seen with the Air Force and the Navy is how DLA supports. And what DLA does for the Air Force and Navy is that they have literally a commander, a battalion level commander, focused on their supply chain. The way CCAD does supply chain right now is one of my directors is doing nothing but my supply chain management through coordination with and synchronization through ALC, DLA, OEMs, and then whoever else is out there as source of supply. So my question to you, Drew, is do you think the Army can ever get to that level of support for the depots in the Army, that the way that they support the depots in the Navy and Air Force? And if not, why do you think the obstacle is?
So I'm going to say that from a personal opinion, but also not step on the toes of Ms. Mosier from an Army decision, because that does have to be an Army decision side of the house. No, the Army does not have retail like the Air Force and Navy has, and it is a distinct difference. I mean, we've toured Tinker, we've toured San Diego. There is a very distinct difference in how that's supported. Short answer to can the Army get there? Absolutely. My personal opinion is, do I think the Army can do it potentially even better than, not better than what the Air Force is doing, but get there quicker than what it took the Air Force because of L&P. Because the Air Force was started art of probable and theory of constraints and all that retail support without an ERP system. So DLA Aviation is or was their ERP system basically. You guys already have, the Army has an L&P system that will help facilitate that. I think, again, for CCAD, there's an advantage that DLA Aviation has done by putting a forward presence out there. And I think, Ms. Mosier, you could speak to the difference for Letterkenny. It operates a little bit different. So I think there's a level of support that DLA Aviation is committed to help the Army and support CCAD as much as possible and to work daily with the supply chain, because there would be a break in that if we weren't forward here and if Melissa wasn't in the production meetings every day, knowing what was getting ahead. I'm going to put the ugliness that I stayed quiet on earlier out on the table. You guys have made a lot of improvement. So August of last year, 28% of your orders were on Army supply plan. At the end of month August, we were in the mid 70% of orders on ASP. Not talking accuracy, I'm just talking on ASP. But material availability never took drastic hits. And I think that's because of the team here in those meetings, no one working ahead, and getting ahead of all that and really collaborate together. So I think there's some level of the support you do see. You don't have an 06 commander over the supply, but I think the collaborative effort really helps kind of engage and bring that together. And then you have an 05 you can beat up for distribution if you'd like. Having distribution here and really, kind of bringing that DLA team forward and supporting CCAD gives you a step forward that a lot of the other Army depots do not have. And then if the Army decides to do retail, all it will do is heighten that with that fenced material. And then you would see a difference in a supply chain shift. But so it's a little bit of a combination there, and I don't know if you want to add to that, Ms. Mosier, from an Army standpoint.
Yes. So I will say that you have your 06 commander level support by the logistics center. As you know, that it is General Gabrum's intent that all supply chain functions be performed by the ALC, the MCOM Logistics Center. So there's that. What Drew says is a critical point in the difference between the other services and the Army. She's absolutely right. The Army has invested, like Mr. Smith stated earlier, billions of dollars in the logistics modernization program to help us manage our supply chain at the wholesale and the retail level. Now, having said that, is there opportunity? Sure there is. And this is what we do very closely in partnering with DLA. Is there, at some point, potentially DLA be more embedded at the depot? Not only, and I don't want to put words in headquarters AMC because, this kind of goes up the chain. But, it's not just CCAD. Is there room for improvement as we turn more of the supply chain management over to DLA? They are doing all the consumable item management today. We're turning all of our spares, buys, everybody's familiar with the TELS, the transitioning that we're coming off TELS contracts. That's transitioning over to DLA from a contracting perspective. So there's always areas for improvement. I think we're always looking. Mr. Sharp just led a team out to tinker. We're continuing to look at other Lean Sigma. Tom Ray out of my shop, he's working. So I think there's always opportunities for improvement. I think the model that DLA has put at CCAD is something that we certainly can look at our other depots because it's very strong here. The ties within the aviation community is stronger, I think, from where I've sat in other positions I've held. The relationship and the ties within the aviation community is stronger than what I've seen at other locations. So long story, but I think there's probably a middle ground.
And Circa,
Here we go.
can I add a
1, 2.
extra? Here. Is this on? If I can add an extra statement on that, for the HA-60Gs, we're working with DLA at NAS Jacksonville to set up a fenced stock for the Air Force depot aircraft to include some local manned build for stock parts and pieces that are hard to get and usually end up costing us a lot of time. So we're working right now to get a fenced stock for, it'd be run out of Jacksonville with DLA as the lead, that then they could support all the other depots. So for the Air Force side, we're trying to work around the issue you're talking about to better support our aircraft.
That is an important part of that. That's why I kind of asked the question. Is there a equal fence? Whereas right now, we can't. I know there's some issues that we're working through.
Let me add a couple things to that. There is potential, like both Renee and Drew said. There are also some challenges. One of the challenges is it doesn't come free. The Air Force is, they moved a lot of people, but they reimbursed them. But the other big challenge is the integration of the systems, because DSS and SAP don't talk particularly well. So we'd have to work through that. That said, there are tremendous opportunities. One of the things that Renee alluded to is, and I say this for actually all of you out there that are OEMs, we, the Army, continue to transfer more items, consumable items, and everything we can to the DLA contracting side. If you haven't, this is kind of a paid advertisement for DLA, but if you haven't looked at or don't have a Captains of Industry agreement with DLA, that is the future. It's the 10-year contracts with huge ceilings that solve a lot of problems for us. Because we all talk about long acquisition lead times, it becomes very short once it's on a Captains of Industry, and they're very broad in scope. So that's another piece that can help overcome some of this. And please look, I know that I can say I think Boeing has one, a big one. GE, I know, has a large one. So please talk to Richmond about that.
John, does that mean, if I'm listening to this right, the more that we transfer to DLA, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but if we transfer more and more and more, does AMC and AMCOM become contract managers rather than really parts providers and suppliers?
So,
Well, okay, I mean, call it whatever you want, but you're becoming less in control of your destiny, and you're becoming more of a manager of a contract.
so no, let me address that. So it is still the responsibility of the life cycle manager. And that also, and that doesn't just include the LCMC, but that's the whole life cycle of an item, from the PEO, from the inception to, even end of life. So you've got that piece of what we are responsible for looking at. We're also responsible for looking Army-wide, not just for CCAD. So let's kind of take our, let's look big Army. Your life cycle managers, they're responsible for worldwide requirements. So I am responsible for just outside of CCAD, but I have to do the analysis, and Rimfire helps with some of that for worldwide demands. So DLA is not responsible for that. The life cycle manager is responsible for that, for the life of that major end item, for that component. And we have to pass that requirement over to our partners. So you're right. So from a contracting perspective, it is the OEM, it is DLA, and that's the piece that we're trying to hand off, that management. But the end-to-end, the looking at the entire spectrum of the life cycle of that item, that is still an item manager, PM, PEO responsibility, and we're not handing that off to DLA.
And Renee is exactly correct. The Army will continue to manage depot-level reparables. That's our job by law today. That never changed. And what changed is when the BRAC 2006, by law, we should be moving non-consumables, consumable items to DLA for management. And we're still continuing to do that. All of the LCMCs are continuing to move items that are not depot-level reparables to DLA for management. Remember, across the Army, if you go to your average SSA, some 80% of the stuff in there comes from DLA anyway. Mm-hmm. On the other side of the coin, that same BRAC language made DLA the procuring agency for depot-level reparables, new buys particularly, and some M&O. What you're seeing is, that's why I talk about Captains of Industry. We can leverage that to get the broader base with the OEMs to buy new depot-level reparables and consumables through one contract, so we can get the volume of scope, or the volume savings that the BRAC law intended. But that doesn't change the responsibility that the Army has to manage those depot-level reparables, as far as actually managing and providing those procurement requirements to DLA. That's still done by the Army LCMCs, and will be for a long time. But also, as Renee said, the PMs working with us are responsible for the end-to-end readiness of those fleets. So we continue to work with DLA to make sure we drive their ability to meet the requirements for readiness in the field up. Is that
Okay, I have two questions. First, for Mr. Hess, what you're trying to do for your H-860G, are you also doing for your UH-1N components? Because that's success, and that's how you get the AOP.
Are you talking about
The fencing off of material.
the fencing off material? That's strictly on the aircraft line, strictly from the Gs. It's not on the Hueys.
Okay. So the second piece, really, I guess, is for the whole panel. And we talk about how we're ready for the fight. So how is the aviation enterprise postured for surge, for that rapid buildup? How do we posture ourselves for success for that?
So I love Roy's question. Thank you, Roy. And it's interesting Roy asked that. Roy runs our manufacturing directorate, and he is often asked to surge to meet someone else's deficiency. So thanks, Roy. And the depot does very well at, I'll call, mini surges. For example, before the hurricane hit, we were looking at producing 32 aircraft, but it was going to be close. And then the hurricane hit, we lost time. Don Dawson's aircraft production folks had to do a mini surge to get those 32 out by the end of the year. But when we do a mini surge, all we are doing is we are burning up assets, program dollars, and material that's already in the pipeline. And we can run that surge until we exhaust those. To Roy's point, how do we do it as an enterprise? I think what would have to happen is we'd have to have program funded to address the increased production. The program funding would allow us to hire the folks to roll in. Contract lead times would have to come way down, and then the supply chain would kick in again to support the surge before depot ran out of assets and resources. The OEMs had to increase their production, and they'd run through the same thing they would have to have contract lead times. I think what we are missing as an enterprise is probably a formalized surge process. When we have to surge, this is an enterprise of what we should do. Who has this responsibility? Who has the next responsibility? How it has happened in my 6-year tenure in the depot is we do have a legitimate need to surge, and we just kind of jump into it and wing it. So thanks for your question, Roy.
So I'd like to add to that. And so one of the key elements of the OIB is the capability to surge in event of a war conflict. So that's why, we call our OIB the national treasure, because that is one of their core competencies, one of their core missions, to be able to surge to meet those requirements. But we can't do that, like we've talked about here, most of the morning. We can't do that, like Bob just said, without the entire enterprise support. You heard General Gabriel earlier this morning talk about just-in-time logistics. And I think my personal opinion, we've gone a little bit too far in the respect of just-in-time. We do not have, I'll call it safety level for lack of a better word. We don't have safety level inventory on the shelf today for some of our critical components. And I'm not, and you can put that in a consumable bucket, or you can put it in a reparable bucket, or you can put it in a major end item bucket. We don't have a repair cycle float for our aviation fleet. We also, from AMCOM, we manage missile. And I know this is an aviation conference, but I have a float for Patriot. We don't have that capability for aviation. So I just kind of like to put that out to the audience, kind of put that back in your mind and take it back to you in your day-to-day job, and think about how you would support that surge. If DOD, take the Army hat off, but if DOD comes knocking on your door to provide that capability, are you structured to do that because you're my supply chain? Outside of just the DLA, outside of the work that CCAD does, you're the supply chain. Every one of these OEMs sitting in here, we're going to come knocking on your door, and can you open the door and provide? There's a question in the back.
Well, can I add a?
And as they walk to the back, I know what was the question prior, but I wanted to give you an example on your question. Ms. Mosier and Mr. Smith kind of articulated it very nicely, but yeah, an example of something that happened yesterday with an item manager from the Army side. A unit had put on the web desk as far as equipment down, and it was a daily managed part. So they've reached out to us asking, hey, are you going to release it? Well, we all know there's a flow in the system, so the unit does. It's got to get all the way to national, so we've got to see it. But there's checks and balances in there to say, hey, can the Army help out first? Is there excess? And so it'll go through that and look for excess first. And it can get hung up there, or another Army unit can have it. That's not necessarily DLA's lane because that's Army-owned material. So that's for us not to get into Army's business. So there's still a level that the Army still has responsibility for. So was talking with the item manager on it, and these particular parts had not made it up to national for us yet. And if we as DLA made the phone call, we're stepping in the lane of the Army's business of something they need to straighten out with the unit. Something had been done incorrectly, it just was a training perspective, but the other service doesn't really need to come in here and tell you, hey, you're not doing your job right. And so the item manager reached back out, is going to talk to the unit, talk to the LAR, and get that resolved, even though it's a DLA managed item. So there's still a level of, even, with talking of transferring items, there's still a level of partnership and a lot of engagement that's still required from the item manager that we continuously will have to team up on and be a part of. So I know you're kind of thinking from it, does it put it all to contracting? But there's still a level of that engagement with the item managers daily to those units within the Army. And I apologize.
Oh, and I was going to piggyback off the surge comment. 2 years ago, we got asked to surge a gunship and a Talon II, which is a penetrator. And with the depot, with supply chain, DLA, in the program office, we worked out how could we go from 200 days down to 122 flow days for a C-130. So we can get a 105 millimeter back out to the fight, protecting our special forces. We were able to work it out. We knew what stock we needed to get based on the bill of materials. Figured up it was going to take an additional about 100 people, both mechanics on the process, plus in some of the bottleneck areas, i.e. paint, depaint, fuel, defuel. And we secured the funding, got the funding, and the first aircraft came out in 99 days. That was only possible because the maintenance knew exactly what they were doing when, what parts they were going to need when. Supply could go in and do the analysis. So what you're doing with the art of the probable will let you answer those questions and say, I can do this if I get these number of additional mechanics. So we paid extra. We got the people on board. It was contractors for 2 years, and now they're integrating it into the normal process. Because it wasn't a one-year surge. With special ops, it's a constant fight. So we're doing that as now normal operations at 122 flow days for the gunships. And they're normalizing that into the process. And they had a separate gated system from the normal gated system, but they looked at impacts to the other lines and what would they need, because we paid for people to work on regular aircraft to get them through the bottlenecks quicker so our aircraft could flow. But it was only possible by going through this art of the probable.
So I think this question is probably for Ms. Mosier. We've talked a lot about the last couple of days on kind of sins of the past in terms of supply chain. Things that have happened in the past that we're trying to correct now. How do we increase our efficiency? How do we get our supply chain back in line? But are we looking ahead? So we've got the Victor model coming up. I know you talked about a replacement for the Air Force and some of their platforms. So in the acquisition cycle, are we looking ahead to say, let's stop these material problems from ever existing in the first place? So what's the plan to go into, the acquisition process and say, look, at milestone B or C, when we're doing that 20-year logistics plan, do we need to make it a 30-year logistics plan because every platform now is extended beyond its original life cycle? So what are we doing with lessons learned to make that happen and prevent these issues in the future?
So that's a really good question. So one of the things, to your point, let's talk the Victor model, because we all know that, that's where we're transitioning, and we're moving to the Mike to the Vic, I think it's the Mike to, or is it Lehman to Victor? L to V. So this is where we go back to, from a logistics center and the relationship that we build with our PEO and our PM partners. It is the responsibility of the beginning of the life for the PM and the PEOs to help us build exactly what you're talking, those future requirements in our supply chain. And so how we've done that is we have embedded a lot of the logisticians, and they work directly with PEO Aviation. I mean, my weapon system teams at ALC, they work hand in hand with the PMs, and so we know what's coming down the pipeline. And so those are the future, I believe they're called E-bombs. We have all these bombs, we have names for every one of them. I get them confused, but it is the responsibility at that time to start building the bomb for those future requirements so we can lay those demands in. Frankly, we haven't been doing a great job at that, and that's something that we're looking at, is how we can improve and strengthen, the conversation we had earlier about laying that foundation, because we haven't done a very good job at it. There's a lot of discussion now, and I don't want to take us down a rabbit trail. I don't know how we're doing on time here, but there's a lot of conversation, about taking some of these systems, and you hear the word transition to sustainment. So what does that really mean? And that terminology, that means different things to different people. But I mean, that's really how we get after it. It's just partnering with our PM, PEO partners, and understanding what the future holds, and then you've got to think ahead, and that's something as logisticians we haven't been, honestly. We do an okay job. We haven't done. Again, my personal opinion, I don't think we've done a great job at laying in those requirements, and it's something we've got to get better at.
You get 2 minutes.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. Here we go. Only 2 minutes. Can I get an easy one now?
I can't see over there that way.
This is probably more for Ms. Jackson or Mr. Hess. As CCAD gets out of the supply business, and rightly so, and turns it over to DLA to manage, will we be in a just-in-time kit environment, or will it be just the same old system we have today with just personality-based decisions making?
So I'll take that first to reiterate Ms. Moser's point that she just went ahead and put out there. So when she's saying the supply chain, she's still talking about being directed from AOC. From a daily aviation standpoint, the forward team's still here to be in place. But I'm going to address the key word that you said, kidding. So we are, and I noticed it's a perfect time that Marco's apparently slid out too. But we've had the conversation, and we've had the conversation with distribution. Just recently talking about getting after the kitting and having the provision kits. So I know Marco's team is working on a list of requirements now to identify kind of looking at per gate as well, and understanding where they need to go to, and identifying all the parts that would go into that kit, that provision kit, and they would come to DLA Aviation to be provisioned, and those individual parts would then be basically stored here at DDCT with distribution, and distribution would do the actual packaging of the kits and deliver them. And that is something we are working on today. So that really doesn't have, it's something that we offer and something that we do that doesn't mean you have to be in the retail atmosphere for that. Right. So it's an initiative that we are already working and hope to, our goal is to get this process through, get the analysis done, identify that, and pretty much start right away. There's nothing holding us back. There is just a process on them. So again, identifying the requirements. We've got to lay in the forecast for those. Mm-hmm. So one thing that we did yesterday while we were at CCAD is talked with a couple of the folks, pulled up a website for Navy Air Force. We do a lot of kitting already, and some of those might even be able to be utilized. I think there's 6 kits you guys already utilize today on either the Navy or the Air Force program. But anyway, showed them the website where you can actually log in and see what provision kits DLA Aviation has today and see if they meet any requirements today. And those kits could already be pushed down here to DDCT today to start being used. However, it takes that forward plan for the demands because we can't take that away from the customer who's already put that in. So we're kind of working that twofold from a kitting aspect. And I don't know if you want to add to that.
The only thing I'd add is that's exactly how the Air Force does it at the base with the kitting. And what we're setting up at Jacksonville is not kitting. There's a lot of items that, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a lot of non-stuck listed items, non-provisioned items that go with the aircraft. So what we're trying to do is set up the hard-to-get items that are not in stock. That's what we're trying to get in the fin stock at Jacksonville. So that's what we're working toward. The 1 eaches, the 2 eaches that you have an issue with, and it takes you a month to get somebody to manufacture. I'd rather have that on the shelf and send to you overnight rather than waiting a month and then manufacture another one, put it on the shelf, and wait for the aircraft to come in.
Okay, with that, I want to thank the panel, give them a round of applause.